Niall, fascinating subject. Dynamics in a family business. You're an expert in family businesses. Talk to me about the dynamics.
Family businesses are different, I suppose, compared to a large PLC where there's a huge, I suppose, gap between the shareholders and management. With a family business situation, there's a lot of interaction, a lot of personality types involved, and the potential for conflict is obviously increased because of that. And with any business where there's more than one person involved, there's two primary categories of individuals that need to be taken into account, being the owners of the business and then those employed or the management in the business. So you need to consider those who own the business and work in it, those who work in the business and may not own it, those who own the business but do not work in it, and those maybe who are working in it and may aspire to an ownership stake in the business. Now this can probably be very well represented by this particular chart.
Put it a little bit back.
Where
Let me
so in this chart you've got, I suppose, three groups of people. You've got the family, you've got the owners, and you've the business itself, being the management in the business. And the first section, family, if they don't own a share in the business or work in it, every member of a business family will still have some attachment to the business. They may have a future expectation of owning a share in the business or working within it. And from a lifestyle perspective, they may be interested in the wealth generated by the business that is transitioned through the owners of the business to the wider family. With the actual owners of the business, category 2, they may own part of the business but do not work in it, and are not family members who will be principally concerned with the return on investment and liquidity. This could include private shareholders, venture capitalists, and they would have an expectation of business decisions being separated from the overall family dynamic. The third is people employed in the business, be they at a management level or more junior level, and they will be primarily concerned with their career prospects and job security. If a business operates primarily on a family first basis, they might find it difficult to recruit good managers, good employees, and as they would be wary of favour afforded to family members when promotion, salary increases, etc. are being considered. Then the fourth section is people who are family members and also own the business. Now they may not necessarily be employed in the business, and usually when a business passes from one generation to the next, some of the family members will not work in it, and their expectations may centre around whether their shareholding is their primary source of wealth, on which they're reliant for dividend income, or whether the overall family values include a responsibility for them to transition their ownership share to future generations. The next category would be category 5, which is individuals who are part of the management team but also have an ownership stake, and that would normally be professional management who would maybe get an equity stake as part of their overall incentive arrangement, and their usual concern will be maximising their return on their investment, which would they'd be concerned with dividend policy and ultimately an exit strategy as to how they'll realise their equity investment. Then the next section would be 6, would be family who are employed in the business, and I suppose there's potential for conflict where family members feel they may not be financially adequately rewarded, unlike maybe individuals who own shares but are not employed in the business. And they also be concerned with career development, and they may also have expectations for ownership or an ownership stake in the business going forward. And finally, then there's those individuals that inhabit all three circles.
The most interesting part of the dynamic.
It is, and they will have interest in the various segments and consequently may face many conflicting choices, particularly in a succession situation, because ultimately they've got to consider family requirements, the needs of the business, particularly at a management level, and ultimately how ownership will transition. Now that also then becomes more complex when you look at family businesses as to where their life cycle is at. Are they in the first generation where they're normally founded, the entrepreneur who founds the actual business? He will have all the power, all the control, all the ownership in his own hands, and a business becomes a family business when they decide to ultimately get other family members involved, be they at an employment level or give them an ownership stake in the business. So their primary concern, I suppose, at that juncture would be, well, if getting other individuals involved, what's their role? How will I involve them? How will I ensure that their involvement will be successful? And ultimately then, if the business is to transition to the second generation, then how that will be managed, where there is more than one family member involved, or even a number of siblings running a business. Obviously there's a little bit more potential for conflict than when it's just run or operated by one individual. And at that stage, then maybe corporate governance comes a little bit more into play. Having a shareholders agreement is probably more appropriate, but where you have a business, say, operated by a number of brothers, they have to be prepared for what happens next. If one of those brothers dies, they could then be operating the business with a nephew or niece, or they could, or with a sister-in-law. And obviously, the relationships become that little bit more diverse, little bit more distant, and that does give rise for potential for conflict. And then obviously, when it passes from a second generation down to a third generation and beyond, then normally is a much more loose collection of cousins that are actually operating the business. And at that point, like at least in where it passes to the second generation, the siblings will have grown up in the same household. There'll be some ties, there'll still be family ties there. Whereas when it gets to the third generation and beyond, those ties are a lot more are a lot further apart. Coupled with that, ownership will be a lot more fragmented. You generally tend to need to require a lot more sophisticated corporate governance structures for managing the interaction between shareholders and different stakeholders, because at that point in time it's more likely than not that there'll be shareholders who won't be employed in the business. There'll be some people who may be employed in the business, and there'll be some people who will wish to exit and realise value from their shareholding, and having a strategy to manage all that is hugely important.